First of all, I just want to say good morning and welcome to the White House. My name is Liza Heyman, and I have the great honor of running our Champions of Change program here out of the Office of Public Engagement. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for those who are joining us on the live stream as we celebrate the innovative and inspirational individuals like our Champions of Change who are here with us today. These champions are dedicated to preparing and protecting their communities to create a more resilient nation. We've heard the president say time and time again that the best ideas don't come from Washington, they come from outside Washington. And that's why in 2011, following the State of the Union address, the president decided that we needed a program that lifted up local community members. So we decided to start the Champions of Change program. This program really celebrates local community heroes driving change at a local level. So it's our job today to lift up these stories, honor these individuals, and we really need your help doing that. So please use the hashtag WHChamps, take photos, use your social media of choice, tweet, Instagram, Facebook. Make sure that we get these stories out and that we can just track our success at the end of the day. And I just want to say it's such an honor for me to meet every one of you and to have you here with us today. And please, everyone take a moment to introduce yourselves and just learn a little bit more about our champions. I now have the distinct honor to introduce Craig Fugate, Administrator to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Under Administrator Fugate's leadership, emergency management has been promoted as a community and shared responsibility. FEMA has fostered resiliency, a community-oriented approach to emergency management to build sustainable and resilient communities. We are very lucky to have Administrator Fugate join us today to honor these extraordinary champions. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Administrator Fugate.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to your White House. I tend to be a pragmatic person, not very sentimental, and not real big on what I call fluff. I don't believe in doing something unless it has an outcome. So when I talk about community preparedness, and I talk about the role of the public, it isn't because I just want people to feel good or I want to recognize, great efforts, which we do. I come back to something that over time I found was a tendency in government to plan and operate as if the public does not exist. That in a disaster, the public are victims and that government will take care of them. And I call this government-centric planning, government-centric problem solving. And you tend to see this when you talk to local officials about volunteers or the public. There's always this angst about volunteers because you don't really control them, they don't really work for you, you don't really know if they know what they're doing. How many have heard this? If somebody's in an accident, stand back and let the professionals help. Again, it may make sense for certain types of events, but if you keep saying that over and over again, what do people hear? Stand back, let the professionals take care of things. And it works well in small events. It sometimes works okay in larger events, but it fails catastrophically in Katrina. When you talk about first responders, President Obama walking through neighborhoods that were merely lumber piles in Joplin, Missouri after an F5 tornado, talking to people of what was left of their homes and asking them, were you here when it happened? Yes. Well, what happened? Well, I didn't have a basement. I went into my closet. I went into my bathroom, all this devastation. And then he started saying, well, what did you do next? Well, I heard people hollering, and my neighbors were trying to dig this family out. So I went over there, and I helped them get that family out. And it, again, struck me that the term first responder applied to that gentleman because he was the first responder without any formal training, without anybody telling him to do it. He did what people do naturally. They help each other. And the larger the disaster, the more likely that first responder is going to be your neighbor. And that tendency, I think, to look at government as the solution and forget about, well, who's providing the services and goods every day in the community? It's the private sector. Well, why aren't they at the table? Many of us, our faith plays a key role in our daily lives, but also in our communities. Where are the churches and the synagogues and the mosques at? Where are they at? And where's the public at? What seat do they have in your plans? Usually when you read most disaster plans, it talks about the public of the things we need to do to take care of them. It doesn't really talk about the public's role. So this is our chance to celebrate putting the responsibility back with the ownership to the public, to the communities we serve. That when disasters are big, government by itself will fail unless people have a seat at the table. And there are different ways to bring that together. And you are exemplary of those different ways to get to that table, to recognize that we cannot ask only one part of a community to solve the problems in a disaster. We need the whole community. And so FEMA has been looking at this over time, recognizing that you cannot plan for what you're capable of doing. You have to plan for what can happen. And in doing that, you have to recognize government will not have enough people, enough resources, nor will they be fast enough unless you're part of that plan, you're part of that team, you are given a role. So when we talk about preparedness, people say, well, what you're really saying is, we got to take care of ourselves. Yes, that's what we've been saying. Because for every one of you that can take care of yourself and your family, that frees up the team to go to those folks that couldn't, who don't have the resources, have greater needs. And for every one of us that has a plan, knows what to do, has the supplies, that means we may be able to now help our neighbor. And we know that in these disasters, that will be the fastest, most effective response of neighbor helping neighbor. But if we're not prepared, if we haven't taken the steps, if we haven't even taken the most simple things to sit down with our family and talk about what could happen and what we may have to do, particularly since we're not always in the same place. We're a very mobile society. We oftentimes, spouses work in different locations, children are in daycare, different schools, and disasters don't happen when we're home all the time. And having a good family communication plan is one of the most basic steps. So again, I'm a pragmatic person. I'm not into a lot of fluff. I look at this nuts and bolts. The larger the disaster, the greater the failure will be if the public is not part of the solution. If they are not part of the team and we do not listen to them on how to be better prepared. We can no longer have, nor can we tolerate, what I call a government-centric solution to problem solving. We have to reach out, ask the questions, get the input, and build a team that recognizes disasters don't impact governments. They impact families, neighborhoods, communities, and at some point they'll get to a political subdivision, whether it's a city or a county and ultimately a state, and then as a nation. So we're celebrating what you have done to move us further to a place that says the whole community needs to be prepared, not just government. And the ideas you bring forth go back into our programs. We take these lessons you teach us and we look at through grant guidance, training, and other opportunities to help spread it. This is being live streamed because when you're up here on this panel, we want you to tell your stories. I was asked by the Solomon family, who are people I got to meet after their son John and I had met, and his blog, In Case of Emergency, read blog. They were asking me, how do you get this out there? How do you communicate that? And I said, it's sort of like a virus. You got to infect people with good ideas. And so you're the good ideas. And hopefully somebody's going to be watching this and they're going to go, hey, I could do that in my community. And one more community will take another step to building that resiliency. When we talk about resiliency, the president makes it clear, being resilient doesn't mean bad things can't happen. but it does mean we're better prepared. We respond faster, we recover from those events, and even these catastrophic disasters, while they may hurt, will not destroy this nation. But it always starts back with, are you ready? Are you prepared? Do you know what to do? And when disaster strikes and you and your family are okay, do one more thing, check on your neighbors. That's how you build a resilient nation. So in your presentations, I hope that your ideas will spread like viruses and that communities will see examples of what they could be doing back home from your examples. And so again, thank you, congratulations, and hopefully you'll infect some more people with these great ideas.
I would now like to introduce FEMA Deputy Administrator Tim Manning. Deputy Administrator Manning works with partners at all levels of government, the private sector, and community organizations across the country to build whole-based resilience. So please join me in welcoming Deputy Administrator Manning and the first panel of champions to the stage. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And congratulations to all of the winners and my fellow panelists here. It's always a great honor and pleasure to be able to come to this event, to partner with the White House, to recognize all of the outstanding work, our award winners, and really everybody across the country that does fantastic work every day to help prepare their neighborhoods, their families, their communities. We have a fantastic opportunity to point out some great projects that have happened around the country. And it's always great to follow Craig because there's so little left to be said that we could get right to the great stories. I do want to take a moment, though, and thank you all for the commitments you've been doing because really, as Craig mentioned, we are all in this together. Community preparedness is emergency preparedness. There are some of us that do this for a living, but we're really just doing it on your behalf. The kind of, helping organize things to the degree we can. People like Gwen Camp and her team and FEMA that work with the CERT teams and work with you all every day. But all of that is negligible compared to what individuals do, what you all do in your communities every day. Every great success story coming out of an emergency, a disaster, a crisis of any kind, be it something as small as a house fire in a neighborhood, or an accident on the way to work, to something as large as a hurricane or an earthquake. The success stories, the great stories always start with a bystander, starts with somebody who sees somebody in need and does something about it. And you are all here today because you've got some great stories to tell about the things you've done to help your community. So again, my honor to be here. So let's start hearing some of these stories. Starting with, I'll do a quick level of introductions here. First, we have Joe Bruno, Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan Bruno, sorry, Chief Operating Officer for the Coalition for the Upper South Platte. Lieutenant Brian Rand is the Training Officer and Emergency Medical Services Coordinator of the Watertown, Massachusetts Fire Department. Susan Reedy, the Senior Public Health Planner for the Albany County Department of Public Health and representing the Albany County Citizen Corps Council. Brittany Valdez is a student at West Virginia University and representing the Partnerships in Assistive Technologies, PATHs. And Philip Amtower is the Director of Christian County, Missouri Emergency Management, representing the MAUCERT 1, Missouri CERT Team 1. All right, let's hear from our champions. And first, congratulations to you all. Thank you. So we'll start with Jonathan, if we may. So how did CUSP engage with regional agencies in public-private partnerships in recovering from the Waldo Canyon fire?
Thank you. Effective response starts long before any incident occurs. In 1998, the Coalition for the Upper South Platte was formed. The Upper South Platte watershed, it's 2,600 square miles. It's west of Denver, feeds Denver residents 75% of their drinking water. CUSP uses a watershed approach to management. As we use this approach, we've created a forum where individuals from all sectors, individuals from all walks of life and businesses from all sectors participate in planning and management of our work within the watershed. It's important that as we face these challenges that cross ownership boundaries, that we all work together, that we come up with some solutions of what's important and how we can act. Our effectiveness to prepare and respond after the Waldo Canyon fire depends upon this history, the strong ties we've created within our region. We've succeeded in rapid response post-Waldo Canyon fire because of these relationships, and these relationships that have focused around a common cause. The relationship building process, as Administrator Fugit mentioned, is all about the level of relationships. We must create relationships with folks, neighbors trusting neighbors, from federal agencies trusting that our organization will act in accordance with their desires and goals. Immediately after the containment of the Waldo Canyon fire, CUSP convened an interdisciplinary team, people from all walks of life, businesses from all sectors. We began to prioritize and assess risk, and we implemented these projects very quickly. The Waldo Canyon fire was 18,000 acres and impacted both private and public lands. Because of the relationships we've built, we were able to quickly and effectively deploy on both private and public properties.
That's great. If I might ask a quick follow-up. So you hosted over 6,500 volunteers with seed spreaders and rakes. How did you go about organizing such a large number of volunteers for something like that?
The coalition's been around for a while, so since inception, we've engaged with volunteers from all walks of life, from all over the country. We have volunteers that come to work with us from as far away as Japan. In terms of the Waldo Canyon, so this was an 18,000 acre fire. It occurred right outside of Colorado Springs, Colorado, second largest city population. After this fire, we noticed that there was going to potentially be catastrophic flooding, and this flooding could impact a significant number of residents within Colorado. Manitou Springs, for instance, is a small community that's located just below where this fire occurred. We realized very quickly that after this fire, there was the potential for significant flooding. We estimated that in some drainages, we could see increases in flood flows upwards of 400%. This meant that parts of Manitou Springs and parts of Colorado Springs could potentially be inundated, and we could lose a lot of lives. So immediately after the fire, CUSP reached out to our volunteer resources through these relationships and partnerships that we've created in the past, and set up a waldofire.org site where volunteers were very quickly able to access project information and be deployed on site. CUSP is a nonprofit organization that has great staff, great leadership at all levels, and we were really able to deploy quickly after the fire because of this past relationship that we had in place with our experts. We worked within the Hayman fire of 2002. At that time, it was the largest wildfire in Colorado's history. It was 137,000 acres. And because of that past response, we were able to quickly deploy these volunteer resources. And of course, the AmeriCorps folks out here, we really appreciate all your support. These guys actually deserve a round of applause as well, because these are some of the most effective groups that we've worked with. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. So Brian, can you describe to us how your efforts have helped bridge some of that gap, empowered citizens to work with responders?
Absolutely. It's funny, being in the position that I'm in, I'm lucky in many ways. One being that all of my programs, or all of the department's programs, all pertain to empowering individuals within the community. And that's great. It fosters the relationships between responders and the community. But it's not as easy as just saying these programs empower the community. there's not a straight line between A and B. And that's kind of where I stepped in to try and fill that gap and bridge that gap. One of the programs that was initiated was a college entrance program for members of my department. And as we saw success with that, we actually began to involve surrounding areas and surrounding departments, and wound up with a very large amount of firefighters who previously would not have entered into a college-level program to enter into that program. And that's very important because the higher education is what directly led me to being able to create such a program. And I wanted to pass that forward to these members and empower them so that they could carry on any endeavors that they chose were important to them as well, should they be in the position. And along with that, and with these programs, there's a direct trickle-down effect to the community, because each program is going to have to come down to a grassroots level and affect the community somehow. I mean, we're not allowed to just go off in any direction we want. You know, there has to be a results-based matrix at the end of it where we can measure, you know, how are we affecting the community? How is the relationship with the community after we've implemented these programs? And some stall out, and some are excellent, and I'm proud to say that most of them are excellent.
That's fantastic. I mean, a great example of good work spawning more good work.
Yes.
That's great. Susan, if I might ask you, so I know many of us in the room are parents, and I think we all, and those of us who do this for a living, have experienced that anxious parents and getting kids involved is always something, a big driver in preparedness programs. Having evacuation plans that account for the fact, as Craig mentioned, that your kids may be at school while you're at work, and being confident in that you know what's going on. So how has the Albany County Citizen Corps been working with child providers, child care providers to build that preparedness for around kids?
Well, we know that emergencies can occur at any time of the day, and children aren't necessarily in the care of their parents when it happens. So we recognized that it was important for daycare providers to have a plan to be prepared in the event of an emergency as well. So the Albany County Citizen Corps partnered with the Capital District Child Care Council to develop a preparedness initiative for daycare providers in Albany County. So it was really twofold. The first was to provide resources to those daycare providers so that they would be prepared in the event of an emergency. And the second was really to utilize them as another mechanism for us to push out emergency preparedness information into the community. So a little bit about the first piece. We knew that the council was already providing a very comprehensive preparedness training education program to the providers, but what they were lacking were the resources that they might need should they have to evacuate or shelter in place. So we worked with them to put together go kits that had items in there that would assist them, specifically if they had to shelter in place or evacuate. So we included things like child identification bracelets, duct tape, plastic sheeting, flashlights, all the things that we want to have in our go kits, but were specific to helping that daycare provider. And then in addition to that, we also provided some coloring books and crayons to kind of keep the kids occupied for at least a few minutes of their time. And then regarding the second piece, we are very fortunate with our Citizen Corps to have an appropriate amount of funding, and we do purchase resources specific to preparedness. And we developed a resource request form for all daycare providers, school-aged programs to complete and send back to us, where they could request specific pieces for educational programming or to push out to their parents and children. So to date, it's been a very successful program. We've been able to push out approximately 5,000 pieces of preparedness resources in less than a year. So, and we still keep it active.
Oh, that's fantastic. And another great example of dual effect of building preparedness within the community, but also trying to reach the parents through kids. Because again, as any of you parents know, that your kids are rule the roost. So that's a great avenue as well. Thanks. So Brittany, as we've been talking about the important ability to communicate between the community and the public and responders and the government and pulling that closer together, that one holistic, whole community response. You guys have been working on that. Can you tell us a little bit about your Tap to Touch app or Tap to Talk app and how that helps bring that communication together?
I'd like to start out by mentioning that the Tap to Talk app was a collaboration between PATH and its partners, the Kanawha Putnam Emergency Planning Committee and the West Virginia Assistive Technology System. The Tap to Talk app facilitates communication between first responders and members of the community in two major ways. The first way is with individuals who have communication issues. This could be because of developmental issues, such as if the person has autism, or due to the emergency situation itself, like if the individual has had a stroke. And this is because the Tap to Talk app utilizes a picture system that depicts common issues of emergency situations through pictures. So these individuals can communicate with the first responders through the picture system instead of verbally. The second way is it is also helpful in emergency situations that involve individuals that have limited English proficiency. Each of the pictures in the albums have been translated from English to French, Spanish, Italian, Japanese, and German. So each picture has accompanying audio. And when the first responders take out the app and touch the picture, it will allow the other individual who doesn't speak English well to both hear and read the question that the first responder is trying to ask them in the appropriate language.
Oh, interesting. That's fantastic. Excuse me. So if I might move a little bit back down the table, and we'll follow up with a couple other questions if I might. But before we do that, Philip, a lot of great work has been done over the years in building CERT teams around the country, and there's been fantastic examples of the great work that that various CERT teams have done in their communities. But in your particular case, can you describe some of the benefits of having a regionally deployable CERT team and some of the successes you may have had in Missouri?
Yes. 2003, we had an F3 tornado go through our county, and I realized then there was a lot of stuff to do after a tornado. The response, the recovery, it takes a lot of people to make that work and get the public back to normal. So I looked into the CERT team then, and I decided to get one started. So a couple months later, we had our first class, and since then, we've taught about 1,000 people. Out of those 1,000 people that we've had in class, probably have right around 200 volunteers that are fairly active. But when we went to Joplin was about 70 miles away. And what we realized that, of those 200 people, there only 5 to 10% of those could be deployed for a long time. They have the volunteers, they have family, they have friends and responsibilities at home, and they just can't leave for 2 weeks. So we got to thinking there was other CERT teams in the area, and why not get all these teams together? I can take my 5% and theirs and effectively merge this together, and we have moved our personnel numbers up 7-fold. So now we have a CERT team that can go farther and be deployed longer and do more good for the community.
Well, that's fantastic. So what advice would you have for somebody wanting to duplicate your efforts? It sounds like it was a fairly, it's different enough from any other experiences I've heard. I imagine there's some unique.
Well, it was almost kind of easy for us in the Midwest. We have disasters a lot, and so.
It's one of the reasons I moved away from the Midwest.
The motivation's there, so, but it does take a lot of hard work, and we have those 7 teams that come together. If we have 40 people, we have 40 different ideas on what needs to be done, and it takes a good assistant to get that, all of those people to work together. So it is tough, but it can be done, and it really does make a difference in the community.
Yeah, that's great. Susan, let me follow up, if I may, with you with something. What in your experience of building the programs you have, what have you found to be the most effective programs in reaching kids, in getting their engagement and wanting to participate?
Sure. Well, I would say that the great thing about kids is their capacity to take in information, and then even better than that, go home and share that information with their parents or their siblings at the dinner table. Like you mentioned, children do rule the roost. And I think that just from my own experience in putting together programming with the Citizen Corps is to really tap into that capacity. And when we're choosing resources, we have found those that produce the best results are those that are age appropriate. They facilitate discussion. And the other thing is, that they're multi-purposed. I think the best example would be if we sometimes purchase pens or pencils with the preparedness message on there, and we hand those out. And the children, they can write with it, but at the same time, every time they pick it up, it drives back that emergency preparedness message. So we tend to look at those kinds of resources when we're putting together educational programming. But I think just as important as what the resource is how it's being presented. And when we're working with children, we always want to make sure that the engagement is fun and interactive. We don't, really want to ever have a passive learning environment. So I think a good example, several years ago, our Albany County Citizen Corps worked with Cornell Cooperative Extension. They are one of our partners. And we reached out to community-based organizations and local schools and PTOs to really provide an educational program for them. So there was a whole list that we put together. So we identified the resources that we wanted to push out into the community, and we partnered it with an activity to really, drive that impact of preparedness to that child or student. So some of those activities included, scavenger hunts, relay races, visits from Rex the Ready mascot. That was a huge hit. And then also we provided shelter training for older children, and that actually proved to be quite a successful program because none of them had been in a shelter before, and I don't think they had any idea of what to expect. And they saw the work that went into it, and that it's not a luxury environment. You're getting the basic necessities of life when you're in there. So it really provided a very different perspective for them, especially those that are very attached to their phones. And if you can't plug that phone in, you can't text your friends. So it was very beneficial for them.
Yeah. I'm not sure what my daughter would do if I took away her phone for a while.
Mine either.
Well, speaking of phones and apps, so Brittany, what gave you what gave your team the idea to build something like this, and how did you go about that?
It started, we were working on a project to facilitate communication between public transit drivers in West Virginia and individuals with communication disorders, and we made a picture flash system. So each bus has a card system with pictures that go along with riding the bus, such as lower the bus, raise the bus, pull the cord to stop. And one of the ladies I work with, Regina Mayolo, she heard about Tap to Talk in an email about assistive technology, and we purchased the software to translate our picture system for the bus drivers into a Tap to Talk album. And one of the individuals at the Kanawha Putnam Emergency Planning Committee saw it and thought that would be great for first responders, and went from there.
Well, it's a great example of mixed disciplines, finding
Yes.
something that works somewhere else and applying it to a novel problem. That's fantastic. Let me throw a question out to all of you. Brian, I'll probably start with you. Maybe I'm going to just take advantage of the fact that I've got some great experience here at the table and our whole team here in the audience. And maybe what advice would you have for the emergency management community? And what more efforts can we do, having built a program where you're engaging with the public and trying to pull, what are traditionally the professional emergency responders together? Do you have any advice for the larger community and how to go about that in your community and how to increase that awareness?
Absolutely. It's very important to increase the awareness. many communities, Watertown included, weren't aware of some of these programs that were out there. I mean, CERT in a metropolitan area, especially in the Northeast, primarily doesn't exist. I mean, there's a few here and there, but once we found out more about this program and what it can offer and the force multiplier it can be for a department where we're in an age of, losing money and losing members and trying to make do with what we have. I mean, this is a fantastic opportunity for any department and I don't mean to say any department, it can be any organization to take advantage of this program. I mean, it's free, the training's free. If you get it out there and you get some motivated individuals, as you can see, it can grow exponentially over a short period of time. So I would say the biggest thing is to just get the word out that it actually exists, that this program is out there.
Well, I don't think I could agree more. That's a great point. So Jonathan, in trying to get word out there that a program exists, what would you say have been if you've got you were able to pull 6,500 volunteers together in the recovery there, in the seeding effort, what were your greatest challenges in trying to get the word out there, and maybe even in the early days? You mentioned been around a while, and maybe lessons that we could all learn from that.
Really, the biggest challenges that we face is there's a disconnect oftentimes. So the Upper South Platte watershed is located 50 miles, give or take, outside of Denver. Denver depends upon this source for their drinking water. So when I talk about protection and preparing for wildfires, that's what we have to deal with. And sadly, we also have those far too often. So we're getting very trained in response and recovery efforts in fires. That's one of the biggest challenges, is that oftentimes there is a disconnect between the end users, so those people that are very dependent upon that resource and the importance of that area, and where it's located. And so one of the biggest challenges we've had is reaching out to the Denver, so the urban population, but we've done that by keeping it as simple as talking about, what's important to you. Is water important to you? Is it recreation? Is your economy important to you? And so we've really looked at how can we sculpt a message that's very focused on the specific needs, desires, and goals of the various sectors out there. An individual that's interested in local economies might not be interested in the dirt bike trail that's out in the woods. And so how can you sculpt a message to make sure that you're hitting as many different sectors of your demographic as possible?
Yeah, I agree with that too. It's a challenge. It's difficult trying to sculpt your message and reach all these different communities. So Phil, maybe I can ask you some of your experience in, again, multiple teams. You have had a lot of success. And frankly, I think it sounds like you're asking more of your CERT teams than most CERT teams would be asking, because you have distant deployments. Do you do active recruitment? How do you go about that? And how do you keep people's involvement and attention?
Well, I've really started out with a good core group of people. And I've kept them busy, and I think over the years we have treated them very well. And volunteers are a different group of people. They come from all walks of life, and you have to, there's a certain way that you handle them. And not, in a bad way, but when I see them at Walmart, I'll stop and talk to them, and I think it's the way you treat them. And we haven't advertised for a CERT class in years. It's all by word of mouth now. I just put up a class and people show up. And we do some advertisement, from pins to hats, and I've kind of looked at how a company would market its program. People want to volunteer for something that's reputable and is a good program. Would you want to volunteer for Joe's volunteer group or the American Red Cross? And they branded themselves, and if you're going to go volunteer for them, what you're going to get. And that's kind of what we've tried to do also, make a good, reputable organization. And if you do that, the volunteers will go the extra mile for you. and go to places like Moore, Oklahoma, and leave their family for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that takes some dedication, but it's a great example of I think the intrinsic altruism of our friends and neighbors. People are willing, when it needs to get done, and you empower them, and you empower people to do what needs to get done, and like Craig said, you don't push them back and say, hey, just let the professionals handle this. People do what needs to get done, and that's really impressive that you're encouraging that. And I'm sure our friends from the Red Cross are thankful for the plug as well. They do great work. It is a really a community-wide effort. So maybe I'll go down and ask really the same question. I think I was a volunteer at one point. That's actually how I started in this profession, is volunteering with various groups. I think you find that similar story among many people. I was lucky enough to find an opportunity to get paid to do it as well, but I have more respect for the people that have to maintain their jobs and a family and serve their community. It's really impressive, and it's a hard thing to encourage. So maybe I'll start back down here with Brittany, if I may. And maybe what advice do you have in getting people to help, and getting people to work towards an effort like yours, and keep them interested and involved?
Before I worked on the project, I had never really been involved in emergency preparedness before. And I had never really thought about all the different populations of people that need to be prepared in emergencies. And working with PASS and WIVATS, we focus mainly on populations with disabilities. And, things that are easy for us, such as, running fire drills and stuff, may not come as easy for them. And even with the Tap to Talk app, one of our challenges is that we have to not only train the first responders on it, but also train individuals with communication disorders, because if they have never seen one like it before, they might not know how to use it. So I think that more opportunities for people to kind of see what needs to be done in emergency preparedness, like me, I kind of have a greater respect for it now.
That's interesting. It's a really interesting idea and approach. So the more that we can do as a community to show that work needs to be done,
Yes.
provides an opportunity for people to be interested and come over. Brian, what's been your experience?
Well, primarily, we don't work with a large amount of volunteers, being professional service. But in my experience, I would say that it's like an hourglass. Once you get a volunteer, or once you're working in that capacity, you have to continually empower them and keep them going. Again, the time just starts ticking down. They come through the door, they're very motivated, they want to help, and once they go through some of the training or realize that it's not for them, you have to turn around and try and encourage them to stay. And I would say that just the empowerment level of what you can accomplish with them will help them to stay within the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've experienced that as well. Susan, what's your experience?
Well, I know for us, volunteer recruitment is very important. Our Citizen Corps developed a website called registeredandready.com, where it's a 24/7 place where people can go and identify if they want to volunteer with particular emergency response organizations within Albany County. And I think it's important to really understand that you have so many different types of people with different needs, and trying to understand what those needs are and how you can engage them. Not everybody can, make a phone call from 9 to 5 and reach out to that volunteer coordinator with the, Medical Reserve Corps or the American Red Cross or County Animal Response Team. So we have been able to provide them with a place to go 24/7 where, I'd like to learn about, the Medical Reserve Corps. Let me read more about it. Yeah, that's where I'd like to go, and there's a direct link for each of those response agencies where they can go and then sign up. So for us, it is very important, and we've been able to increase volunteer recruitment exponentially. But I think once you get that partner, once you get that volunteer, you've got to keep them engaged. And I think that's where training comes in, so that you're continuing to empower them to do the job that we need them to do in an emergency.
You raise an interesting point, something I've heard many places around the country. And maybe, Phil, I'll throw it to you, but anybody feel free to jump in as well. In trying to build partnerships between government agencies or build initiatives, like the team, the individual community preparedness team does here, and like you all do, and many of you do back home, often we run into difficulties where the government program side of providing assistance works during business hours, and the community teams that we're trying to have their own business hours. And have you had difficulties, or how have you bridged that gap to be able to engage, to get, say, the county emergency management folks to work with volunteers at nights and weekends? Has that been a challenge? Have you had any positive experiences there?
Not really. We live in a pretty rural area. Christian County is 80-some thousand. We have just 2 fire departments in our county that are paid full-time. The rest are still volunteer. They're, however, large departments, but we haven't had that many issues with the volunteer groups. When the program first started, we did. Nobody knew what CERT was, and or what they were capable of, and why are we going to let you on our scene? But after a while, your previous question, I overwork these people and underpay them, and they keep coming back. And
So that's the secret, pay cuts.
and they might not let me back in the county when I tell you this, but it's like babysitting. I got to keep them focused and active, or they, idle hands. But they always want something to do, and we've managed to get those relationships built up. So a lot of our CERT volunteers are doing rehab at big fire incidents. They're helping the police officers do DWI checkpoints. We're doing traffic control of parades. So they're out there and integrated in the community. So wherever you go, you're going to see a green shirt or a vest somewhere. And we work a lot with the health department and the strategic national stockpile system. So over the years, we've really got integrated, and it really hasn't been an issue between the government and non-government. It has to work.
Yeah, it does. You're right. It has to work. We're all in this together, like I said before. Community-based emergency management has to be truly community-based. It's got to be neighbors helping neighbors, community groups, and working in partnership. So before I let you all go, there's another panel coming up behind you with some of your colleagues, award winners with some other fantastic programs. But I want to give you all the opportunity, and maybe give us the opportunity to hear if you've got one last bit of advice, just to maybe for somebody wanting to build a program like yours, some of the challenges you may have faced, some of the adversities you might have overcome, maybe some advice for us in trying to help foster people like you around the country that are doing the great work like you've done. And maybe Brittany, I'll start with you. One piece of anything that you found hard that you've overcome, or just a simple piece of advice for us.
Our project took about a year to complete, so, it just takes time and effort, to put into it. And eventually it pays off.
Stick with it.
Yes.
That's good advice. Probably good advice with anything. Yeah.
Follow through. Whatever endeavors you take, regardless of how they're going, you need to follow through all the way to the end. And just take full responsibility for your failures, and I guess responsibility for your accomplishments as well. But
Like being here.
I would say utilize the resources that you have available to you. I know within our Citizen Corps, we have a very broad group of partners, and they all have very distinct value, and it's tapping into that value and pulling it together to provide a very cohesive program. So just tapping into the capacity that you have available to you.
That's great.
My recommendation would be that we continue to support grassroots organizations across the United States, across the world. That we look to those places and those people that are very passionate about their local area. They have the most knowledge of that local area, and continue to support their efforts through grants and technical support. It's really important that we embrace our local communities and those experts and really give them something to do, because they want to be out on the ground. They want to be on the scene. They want to lend a hand.
That's great. Any last word of advice for us?
I'm not sure. Surround yourself with knowledgeable people, and, because you don't know everything, and have a good assistant, and a good family. Always remember, family first. That's it.
Well, you can't top that. So I want to take the opportunity to thank the White House for letting us be here again, on behalf of Craig and the whole team at FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you all for the work you do, for the work you do, and congratulations again. This is fantastic information. Thanks a lot, and congrats. And we look forward to hearing the next panel. Thank you all. Thanks.